The 1970s were a wild time for Saturday morning TV. Kids didn't just tune in for colorful laughs. They got cartoons that mixed pop culture fads, recycled formulas, and some seriously weird ideas. Some shows stuck, but many disappeared into the dustbin of memory. How many of these do you even remember? And better yet, how many would you dare to rewatch today? Strap in, because the forgotten gems ahead are stranger than you think. The Funky Phantom, 1971 to 72. Imagine Scooby-Doo, but swap the Great Dane for a ghost from the Revolutionary War who can't stop sneezing. That's the Funky Phantom, and yes, it was as bizarre as it sounds. Hanna-Barbera, chasing the monster mystery craze, introduced Jonathan Wellington, Muddsy Muddlemore, a cowardly spirit who accidentally freed himself from a clock when a group of teens stumbled upon it. He joins them in solving mysteries, which often boiled down to crooks and disguises. What made this cartoon different wasn't the mysteries. It was Muddsy himself. Voiced by Dawes Butler, Muddsy's mannerisms were a straight copy of Snagglepuss, right down to the voice, which left kids either chuckling or confused. The Revolutionary War angle was oddly patriotic for a cartoon aimed at sugar-rushed kids, but it gave the show a quirky historical flavor. Each episode leaned on slapstick, pratfalls, and the ghost's inability to actually do much but get scared. The Funky Phantom never became the cultural juggernaut Scooby-Doo was, and it only lasted one season. But it's a perfect time capsule of 70s Saturday mornings, recycled ideas, corny gags, and a ghost that sneezed his way into obscurity. It was silly, it was derivative, but it was unforgettable for kids who saw it. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kids, 1973. A bubblegum pop band who moonlight as secret agents. That's Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kids, one of Hanna-Barbera's wildest experiments. Picture the Partridge Family smashed together with James Bond, and you'll start to get the idea. The band members, led by the cool Butch Cassidy, toured the country playing gigs, while also taking orders from a supercomputer named Mr. Socrates, who gave them secret missions. If that sounds insane, it's because it was. The band had a shaggy dog named Elvis, a clumsy comic relief sidekick, and adventures that usually involved foiling jewel thieves, spies, or criminal masterminds. The real kicker was that the missions were usually squeezed between bubblegum pop numbers that were actually released as songs, proving Hanna-Barbera wasn't just making cartoons, they were trying to cash in on the music craze. Despite its flashy premise, the series only lasted 13 episodes. It had all the ingredients for a hit: music, spies, gadgets, and slapstick. But somehow it never clicked with kids the way Josie and the Pussycats did. Still, the sheer audacity of combining bubblegum rock and espionage makes this show one of the strangest forgotten relics of Saturday mornings. It was corny, it was colorful, and it was pure 70s. Goober and the Ghostchasers, 1973. Meet Goober, the most cowardly cartoon dog you've probably never heard of. Hanna-Barbera once again tried to recreate the Scooby-Doo magic with Goober and the Ghostchasers, but this time the dog had a twist. He literally turned invisible when scared. Sounds like a great gimmick, right? Except it made him completely useless when danger showed up, which was always. Goober and his teen friends, who were reporters for a magazine called Ghostchasers, would travel around investigating supposed hauntings. The ghosts usually turned out to be criminals in masks, though occasionally the show bent toward real supernatural threats. And yes, just like Scooby-Doo, the kids relied on bumbling luck and goofy plans to save the day. The invisibility gimmick was a double-edged sword. On one hand, it was funny watching Goober disappear in panic. On the other hand, it meant the team's mascot constantly abandoned them in the middle of danger. This left the actual mystery solving to the kids, which didn't have the same charm as Scooby's reluctant bravery. Like many of Hanna-Barbera's experiments, it burned out fast, with only a single season produced. Yet, it deserves a nod for trying something different in an era where every show was either a Scooby clone or a superhero cartoon. Goober's invisibility was an idea that sounded better on paper, but it left a lasting impression on kids who stumbled onto it. The Amazing Chan and the Chan Clan, 1972. Before diversity was a buzzword, Hanna-Barbera brought Charlie Chan and his 12 kids into the Saturday morning lineup. The amazing Chan and the Chan clan was both ambitious and messy. On paper, it was a mystery-solving show with a massive family cast and plenty of action. In execution, it often felt like too much was going on at once. Charlie Chan, voiced by Key Luke, the only Chinese-American actor to ever play Chan on screen, led his brood of 12 children who solved mysteries while also doubling as a garage band. Yes, they not only crack cases, but also perform songs in between. With such a huge cast, many of the kids blended together, but the show gave each child at least a moment to shine. The series was notable for casting Asian American voice actors for the children after early criticism of its authenticity, something rare for the era. Despite the attempt at cultural respect, it never escaped the shadow of stereotypes. The mysteries were lighthearted, but the music interludes and endless Chan children often left audiences overwhelmed. It ran for just 16 episodes and then vanished. Yet, its attempt to blend mystery, music, and representation makes it stand out as one of the more unique forgotten cartoons of the 70s. Messy? Sure. But it was also oddly ahead of its time. Sealab 2020, 1972. Long before Sealab, 2021 turned the concept into an Adult Swim parody, there was Sealab 2020, a serious environmental adventure series. Set in the year 2020, the show imagined a massive underwater laboratory where scientists, adventurers, and their families live beneath the sea, studying marine life and protecting the oceans. It was surprisingly earnest for a Saturday morning cartoon. Instead of slapstick dogs or goofy sidekicks, episodes focused on topics like pollution, oil spills, and underwater exploration. The crew of Sealab included Captain Murphy, Doctor, Williams, and a diverse cast of scientists who tackled problems both natural and man-made. It was a clear attempt to mix entertainment with educational messaging, hoping to inspire kids to think about the planet's future. Unfortunately, the show may have been too serious for its young audience. Kids who wanted laughs and hijinks weren't ready for lectures on oil slicks and endangered species. With only 13 episodes produced, it quickly sank from memory. Yet, looking back, Sealab 2020 feels strangely prophetic. It predicted environmental concerns and painted the oceans as both a frontier of hope and a battleground of human carelessness. While it never became a hit, it left just enough of a cultural footprint to later inspire its infamous parody. Forgotten by most, Sealab 2020 was Saturday morning television trying to teach kids about the real world before breakfast cereal. Sugar rushes kicked in. The Roman Holidays, 1972. If you thought Hanna-Barbera had milked every prehistoric gag out of the Flintstones and every futuristic one out of the Jetsons, think again. Enter the Roman Holidays, their attempt to squeeze comedy out of ancient Rome. The setup was familiar, an everyday family navigating ordinary life, but with historical twists. Instead of driving cars made of stone or flying space pods, the Holidays traveled by chariot, paid rent to a grumpy landlord, and worked under a pushy boss in Roman togas. The family itself was straight out of the Hanna-Barbera playbook. Dad Augustus, Mom Lori, kids Procotia and Happius, and a pet lion named Brutus. Yes, a lion. The writers clearly wanted their own Dino or Astro-style sidekick, but Brutus mostly served as a big cat punching bag for slapstick jokes. What makes the Roman Holidays fascinating in hindsight is how formulaic yet ambitious it was. The writers tried weaving historical elements into sitcom situations. Gladiator matches as office picnics, toga parties as suburban barbecues, and centurions doubling as nosy neighbors. But the humor rarely landed with the same timeless punch as its predecessors. The series aired for just 13 episodes on NBC before quietly vanishing, overshadowed by stronger reruns of the Flintstones. Still, its existence shows how hard studios were pushing the family sitcom in a wacky setting formula. Ancient Rome wasn't exactly what kids were asking for on Saturday mornings, but Hanna-Barbera gave it to them anyway. Forgotten? Absolutely. But it's one of the boldest examples of just how far they were willing to stretch a winning idea. Clue Club, 1976, 77. Mystery-solving teens and talking dogs were practically a Saturday morning requirement in the 70s, but Clue Club tried to put its own spin on the formula. This Hanna-Barbera series featured 4 young detectives, Larry, Pepper, Dee Dee, and Dottie, who solved crimes with the help of 2 dogs, Woofer and Whimper. Woofer believed he was a brilliant detective, but usually guessed wrong, while Whimper quietly saved the day. On paper, it was another Scooby clone. But Clue Club had one thing that set it apart: Dottie. While the older teens investigated, Dottie stayed back at headquarters, using her computer to analyze evidence and feed the team vital information. For a 70s cartoon, giving a girl the role of high-tech whiz was pretty forward-thinking. The mysteries were standard fare: missing jewels, crooked magicians, counterfeit schemes. But the writing leaned on humor and the bickering between the dogs. Woofer's constant wrong guesses became a running gag, while Whimper's eye rolls added subtle comic timing. Clue Club only lasted 1 season on CBS, but reruns were recycled for years in the Scooby-Doo and Friends package, where many kids assumed it was just another Scooby spin-off. In truth, it was one of the better constructed mystery shows of the era, with solid pacing and a surprisingly clever use of technology for its time. Forgotten today, it deserves a little credit for being smarter than most of its peers. Inch High, Private Eye, 1973. Here's a pitch no one asked for. What if a private detective was literally 1 inch tall? That's the entire premise of Inch High, Private Eye. It sounds ridiculous because it was, but Hanna-Barbera gave it a full season anyway. Inch High worked for the Finkerton Detective Agency, solving crimes with the help of his niece Lori, her burly boyfriend Gator, and their dog Braveheart. His tiny size let him sneak into places no normal detective could, though it also created endless slapstick when villains flicked, stomped, or misplaced him. The group drove around in the Hushmobile, a bright green car that looked like a mix between a dune buggy and a spaceship. The jokes leaned heavily on the obvious: Inch getting trapped in bottles, nearly stepped on, or hiding in pockets. But there was also an underdog charm to watching a pint-sized detective take on full-size criminals. Voiced by Lenny Weinrib, Inch had a wisecracking style that played up the absurdity of the whole thing. Like many 70s cartoons, Inch High burned out quickly, running for only 13 episodes. Critics dismissed it as too silly even for kids, but its sheer oddity has given it a small cult following. Decades later, Inch even made cameo appearances in Cartoon Network specials, proof that some ideas are just too bizarre to ever, truly die. Forgotten, yes, but also unforgettable once you've seen it. Wheelie and the Chopper Bunch, 1974. Years before Pixar's Cars, Hanna-Barbera unleashed Wheelie and the Chopper Bunch, a show where vehicles were the characters. Wheelie was a red Volkswagen Beetle, his girlfriend was Rotary, and his constant enemies were a gang of talking motorcycles led by Chopper. The show's setup was basically Wacky Races meets Looney Tunes. Each episode had Wheelie trying to enjoy life, only for Chopper and his gang to cause trouble. The humor relied on car-themed gags: Wheelie getting a flat at the worst time, engines backfiring during chase scenes, or the Chopper Bunch sabotaging races. What stood out was that Wheelie never spoke. Instead, he communicated with honks, beeps, and pantomimes, almost like a cartoon version of R2-D2. His girlfriend and rivals, however, did speak, making the show feel like a strange hybrid between silent comedy and typical Hanna-Barbera chatter. Despite its unique gimmick, the show only lasted 1 season. Kids were intrigued by talking cars, but the formula got repetitive fast. Still, it deserves recognition for experimenting with non-verbal humor in a Saturday morning slot. Forgotten by most, Wheelie and the Chopper Bunch was a strange little detour in the era of Scooby clones, showing that not every cartoon needed a wisecracking sidekick. Sometimes, a beep was enough. Speed Buggy, 1973 to 75. While Wheelie struggled with silent gags, Speed Buggy gave its talking car a full personality, and it worked. This series followed a dune buggy with a stuttering voice. Think Scooby-Doo with an engine, who traveled with his human friends Tinker, Debbie, and Mark. Together, they entered races around the world while stumbling into mysteries, sabotage, and criminal plots. Speed Buggy himself was the star. Voiced by Mel Blanc, the same legend behind Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, the character had a nervous charm that made him both funny and lovable. Unlike Scooby, Speed Buggy was genuinely useful, often using his mechanical tricks to outsmart villains or save his friends. The show thrived on colorful settings, jungle races, desert rallies, high-tech tracks, and a mix of action and comedy. The mysteries were lightweight, but the racing element gave the series a faster pace than most Hanna-Barbera shows. Kids who loved cars and gadgets found plenty to latch onto, and the Dune Buggy's goofy stutter made him instantly memorable. Speed Buggy ran for 2 seasons and even crossed over with Scooby-Doo and Josie and the Pussycats, proving Hanna-Barbera was building its own cartoon universe long before Marvel made it cool. Though overshadowed by bigger hits, Speed Buggy still pops up in nostalgic cameos, reminding us that for a few short years, a stuttering dune buggy was Saturday morning royalty. Devlin, 1974 to 76. When Evil Knievel fever gripped America, it was only a matter of time before Saturday morning cartoons jumped on the bandwagon. Enter Devlin, Hanna-Barbera's stuntman cartoon that ditched the usual ghosts and talking dogs for something more grounded. Well, as grounded as a motorcycle daredevil who regularly cheated death could be. The show followed Ernie Devlin, a motorcycle stunt rider who traveled the country with his younger siblings Todd and Sandy. Together, they performed in a traveling stunt show while also getting caught up in small-town dramas, criminal schemes, and occasional mysteries. Unlike most Saturday fare, Devlin aimed for realism. There were no talking pets, no secret agents in disguise, just a motorcycle stuntman trying to do the right thing. Episodes often carried a moral lesson about honesty, teamwork, or responsibility, clearly reflecting the network's growing pressure to include educational content in kids' programming. Still, the real draw was watching Ernie pull off stunts, leap over buses, and survive crashes that would have put anyone else in the hospital. Unfortunately, this attempt at realism may have worked against it. Kids tuned in expecting action-packed escapades, but sometimes got slow-moving plots about personal choices and family values. Even so, Devlin lasted 2 seasons and left a quirky mark as one of the rare 70s cartoons inspired directly by real-world pop culture trends. Forgotten today, it's proof that not every Saturday morning show had to involve ghosts or superpowers. Sometimes, it was just about a guy, his siblings, and a motorcycle. Jana of the Jungle, 1978. Tarzan had already swung through countless adaptations, but in the late 70s, Hanna-Barbera decided to try something different. A female jungle hero. Jana of the Jungle followed Jana, a blonde adventurer raised in the Amazon rainforest after a plane crash separated her from her parents. Armed with a necklace that let her communicate with animals, she swung from vines, tamed wild beasts, and battled poachers and villains with the help of her animal companions. Jana's allies included Ghost, a jaguar, and Tico, a helpful armadillo. Her human sidekick was Dr. Ben Cooper, who provided comic relief while Jana did most of the heavy lifting. Each episode was a mix of environmental messaging and jungle action, with Jana usually stopping greedy developers or criminals threatening the rainforest. For the time, Jana was notable because she wasn't a sidekick. She was the lead. Saturday mornings were still dominated by male heroes, but Jana stood tall as a capable, confident female protagonist who could fight, strategize, and lead the adventure. Unfortunately, the show only lasted 13 episodes before fading away. Perhaps it was too derivative of Tarzan, or maybe the networks weren't ready to fully embrace a female hero in that slot. Still, Jana deserves credit as a trailblazer, planting seeds for future action heroines in animation. Forgotten by most, she remains one of the rare bright spots of originality in a decade full of recycled formulas. Mighty Man and Yuck, 1979 to 81. If you thought Inch High, Private Eye was strange, wait until you meet Yuck, the world's ugliest dog. In Mighty Man and Yuck, a tiny superhero named Mighty Man fought crime with his sidekick Yuck, a small dog whose face was so hideous it had to be covered by a doghouse-shaped helmet. Whenever Yuck lifted the helmet, villains were paralyzed in terror. The concept sounds like it came out of a fever dream, but kids in the late 70s ate it up. Mighty Man, who was about the size of a doll, had super strength and flight, while Yuck's power was pure nightmare fuel played for laughs. Together, they fought a rogues gallery of crooks, mad scientists, and bumbling criminals. Produced by Ruby Spears, the show leaned heavily into slapstick and absurdity. The villains were over the top, the plots were thin, and the gags were non-stop. But Yuck was the real star. His grotesque power was so bizarre that it made every episode feel unpredictable. Would Yuck accidentally terrify an ally? Would he unleash chaos by sneezing the helmet off? These moments became the comedic highlight. Running from 1979 to 1981, Mighty Man and Yuck actually outlasted many of its contemporaries, proving that sometimes the weirdest ideas stick the longest. Forgotten today, it's still one of the strangest hero-sidekick duos ever put on Saturday mornings. 14th Valley of the Dinosaurs, 1974. Take Land of the Lost, remove the sleaze tax, and animate it, and you get Valley of the Dinosaurs. This Hanna-Barbera adventure series followed the Butler family, John, Kim, Greg, and Katie, who were swept into a whirlpool while rafting in South America, and found themselves trapped in a prehistoric valley. There, they befriended a caveman family and tried to survive alongside towering dinosaurs. Unlike many 70s cartoons, this show leaned into action and survival rather than slapstick. Episodes had the Butlers facing volcanic eruptions, river rapids, and dangerous beasts. The dinosaurs were often both friend and foe, sometimes used for transportation, other times causing havoc. The caveman family added culture clash humor, with the Butlers teaching them about modern inventions while learning survival skills in return. It was essentially a prehistoric survival drama for kids, with environmental undertones and plenty of dinosaur action. The animation was colorful, but the pacing sometimes dragged, making it feel more like an educational adventure than a thrill ride. Still, it stood out in an era of mystery-solving teens because it offered something different. Valley of the Dinosaurs ran only 16 episodes, airing the same year as the live-action Land of the Lost. The two shows inevitably drew comparisons, and Land of the Lost ended up stealing the spotlight. Today, Valley is barely remembered, but for dinosaur-loving kids of the 70s, it was an unforgettable. Part of their Saturday mornings. Hong Kong Phooey, 1974 to 76. He was a janitor by day, a kung fu superhero by accident, and one of Hanna-Barbera's most absurd creations, Hong Kong Phooey. Voiced by Scatman Crothers, Phooey was Penrod Penry Pooch, a bumbling dog who turned into a martial arts master whenever trouble struck. Armed with his trusty Hong Kong book of kung fu and a wild sense of slapstick, Phooey always managed to stumble his way to victory. The humor came from his incompetence. Phooey's sidekick, a sarcastic cat named Spot, usually saved the day while Phooey took the credit. The villains were over-the-top stereotypes of crooks and con artists, easily foiled by Phooey's accidental antics. Action sequences often turned into physical comedy routines, with Phooey getting stuck in trash cans, bouncing off walls, or tripping his enemies by sheer luck. The show was a direct product of the 1970s martial arts craze, capitalizing on the kung fu boom in pop culture. It blended karate chop action with slapstick humor, giving kids a hero who was as clumsy as he was lovable. Running for 2 seasons, Hong Kong Phooey became a cult favorite thanks to Scatman Crothers' energetic voice work and the catchy theme song. It's remembered more fondly than most of its peers, but still qualifies as forgotten compared to Hanna-Barbera's biggest hits. Quirky, chaotic, and endlessly entertaining, Phooey proved that even the worst kung fu can make for great Saturday morning TV. So, there you have it. 15 Saturday morning cartoons from the 1970s that time forgot. From ghostly sidekicks and spy bands to invisible dogs, talking cars, and a kung fu janitor, these shows prove just how experimental and downright bizarre the decade really was. Some were flops, some were cult classics, but all of them gave kids something to talk about over their bowls of cereal. Which of these do you remember? Drop your favorite in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more forgotten treasures. After all, nostalgia is only fun when you bring it back to life.